Christ is in our midst. Welcome to Spiritual Calisthenics. Today, on March 18th, we commemorate the third Saturday of Lent, as well as St. Cyril, Patriarch of Jerusalem, Trophimos and Eukarpion, the Monk-martyrs of Nicomedea, and Edward, the Martyr King of England. Regarding St. Cyril, this saint was born in 315 and succeeded Maximus as Archbishop of Jerusalem in 350. He was zealous for the Orthodox faith and was a defender of the poor. He was exiled 3 times by the Arian emperors Constantius and Valens, but after their deaths he was recalled to his throne. He reposed in peace in 386. Of his writings, the most prominent are his catechetical lectures, which are considered the most ancient systematic summary of Christian teaching. Before St. Cyril there have been 2 dioceses, one of Jerusalem and one of Holy Sion. Under St. Cyril they were united into one bishopric. A model of faith in the image of gentleness, the example of your life has shown you forth to your sheepfold to be a master of temperance. You obtained thus to being lowly gifts from on high, and riches through poverty. Cyril, our Father, and priest of priests, intercede with Christ our God that he may save our souls. This next saint is of particular importance to me because one of my spiritual children was baptized with this name, St. Edward, the Martyr King of England. St. Edward the Martyr was King of England from 975 until he was murdered in 978. Edward was the eldest son of King Edgar the Peaceful, but was not his father's acknowledged heir. On Edgar's death, the leadership of England was contested, with some supporting Edward's claim to be king, and others supporting his much younger half-brother, Aelfred, the recognized as a legitimate son of Edgar. Edward was chosen as king and was crowned by his main clerical supporters, the archbishops Saints Dunstan and Oswald of Worcester. King Edward was a young man of great devotion and excellent conduct. He was completely orthodox, good, and of holy life. Moreover, he loved God and the church above all things. He was generous to the poor, a haven to the good, a champion of the faith of Christ, a vessel full of every virtuous grace. On King Edward's ascension to the throne, a great famine was raging through the land, and violent attacks were stirred up against monasteries by prominent noblemen who coveted the lands that his father King Edgar had endowed to them. Many of these monasteries were destroyed, and the monks forced to flee. The king, however, stood firm together with Archbishop Dunstan in the defense of the church and the monasteries. For this, some of the nobles decided to remove him and replace him with his younger brother, Aelfred. The great nobles of the kingdom, Ealdormur, Aelfred, and Aelfwine, quarreled and civil war almost broke out. In the so-called anti-monastic reaction, the nobles took advantage of Edward's weakness to dispossess the Benedictine reformed monasteries of the land and other properties that King Edgar had granted to them. Edward's short reign was brought to an end by his murder at Corfe Castle in 978, in circumstances that Shaftesbury Abbey early in 1979. In 1001, Edward's remains were moved to a more prominent place in the abbey, probably the blessing of his half-brother King Aelfred. Edward was already reckoned a saint by this time. A number of lives of Edward were written in the centuries following his death, in which he was portrayed as a martyr, generally seen as a victim of the Queen of Dowager of Aelfred, mother of Aelfred. Immediately following the murder of King Edward during a hunting trip, his body slipped from the saddle of his horse and was dragged with 1 foot in the stirrup until the body fell into a stream at the base of a hill upon which Corfe Castle stands. The stream was found thereafter to have healing properties, particularly for the blind. The queen then ordered that the body be hurriedly hidden in a hut nearby. Within the hut, however, lived a woman who was blind from birth and whom the queen supported out of charity. During the night a wonderful light appeared and filled the whole hut. Struck with awe, the woman cried out, "Lord, have mercy," and suddenly received her sight. At this she discovered the dead body of the king. The church of St. Edward of Corfe Castle now stands on the site of this miracle. At dawn, the queen learned of the miracle and was troubled. Again she ordered the disposal of the body, this time by burying it in a marshy place near Warheim. A year after the murder, however, a pillar of fire was seen over the place where the body was hidden, lighting up the whole area. This was seen by some of the inhabitants of Wareham, who raised the body. Immediately a clear spring of healing water sprang up in that place, accompanied by what was now a huge crowd of mourners. The body was taken to the church of the Most Holy Mother of God in Wareham and buried at the east of the church. This took place on February 13th, 980. On the account of a series of subsequent miracles, the relics were translated to the Abbey of Shaftesbury. When the relics were taken up from the grave, they were found to be whole and incorrupt. The translation of the relics on February 13th, 981 was arrived at Chexeray 7 days later. The relics were received by the nuns of Shaftesbury Abbey and were buried with full royal honours on the north side of the altar. On the way from Wareham to Shaftesbury, a further miracle had taken place. 2 crippled men were brought close to the bier, and those carrying it lowered the body to their level, whereupon the cripples were immediately restored to full health. This procession and these events were reenacted 1,000 years later in 1981. In 1001, the tomb in which the saint lay was observed to regularly rise from the ground. King Ethelred was filled with joy at this, and instructed the bishops to raise his brother's tomb from the ground and place it in a more fitting place. As the tomb was opened, a wonderful fragrance issued from it, such that all present thought that they were standing in paradise. The bishops then bore away the sacred relics from the tomb and placed them in a casket in the holy place of the saints, together with the other holy relics. This elevation of the relics of St. Edward's took place on June 20th, 1001. And St. Edward was officially canonized in 1008. The epistle for today, on the third Saturday of Lent, from St. Paul's letter to the Hebrews. Brethren, recall the former days when you were enlightened. You endured a hard struggle with suffering, sometimes being publicly exposed to abuse and affliction, and sometimes being partners with those so treated. For you had compassion on the prisoners, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession, and an abiding one. Therefore do not throw away your confidence, which has such a great reward. For you have need of endurance, so that you may do the will of God, and receive what is promised. For yet a little while, and the coming one shall come, and shall not tarry, but my righteous ones shall live by faith. So just as we saw with these great saints, let us hurry towards the treasure that is past telling, Christ our God. The Gospel according to St. Mark. At that time, as Jesus passed on, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax office, and he said to him, Follow me. And he rose and followed him. And he sat at a table in his house. Many tax collectors and sinners were sitting with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. And the scribes of the Pharisees, when they saw that he was eating with sinners and tax collectors, said to his disciples, Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? Have we not seen this ourselves in our own communities? And when Jesus heard it, he said to them, Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. And the following line is, to repentance. Christ is present that we might be changed, that we might be pricked by his love, so that we can change. That's why he sits at table with us, for we are sinners. If you're already righteous, good for you. But most of us are not. We need Christ's help and his love. I hope that you've enjoyed today's Spiritual Calisthenics. Have a blessed and wonderful day.